Sir, thanks for joining us today. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself, your name, your background, to give us a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Okay, yeah. No, my name is Malcolm Macrae. I was born sadly, I was actually born south of the border, but I was only there for a very short period of time. I think it was due to my father being in the army, and he was posted in Warminster at the time. But we moved very quickly north of the border, and I spent the first 2 years of my life living at Fort George.
Lovely.
When he was CEO of the Seaforth Training Depot. And we were in Scotland really from ever after that. But yeah, no, I was brought up in the Highlands, and well, I was sent away to a school down in the south of England when I was 8, which is, I'm not quite sure why that happened, but I went to a prep school down in the south of England. And then I went to Glenalmond when I was 13, and then ended up at the doing agriculture at Aberdeen. And after that, I did 10 years in the army, and then came home in 1989 and took over the family farm, and I've been here ever since.
That's great, sir.
And so we know that you didn't start your career with military in mind. You know, you're saying there that you went to the College of Agriculture. That was 1975. It wasn't until 1978 when you entered the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to change your career?
You know, I did agriculture for 3 years because obviously we were farming up in Orkney, and you know, my father retired when I was about 11 or 12, and so farming was really what I was brought up with as a teenager. But I think the older members of the cadets will probably remember Colonel Macrae, who I think was commandant of the Highlanders cadets, and also he was regimental secretary. And he groomed me from a very early age to join the army. He used to send me the regimental magazine, you know, when I was 12 and 13 years old. And I think having a father who was in the army, it was always in my blood. Mm-hmm. But agriculture I went to do, but you know, when I left the Agri College in 1978, I was only 22, and I thought I was too young really to come home and take over the farm. And I wasn't, you know, I was wanting to go out and see the world and do lots of other things. So that's why I joined the army.
And sir, you were given a Sword of Honour during your time in the military. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, that was a huge surprise. I think, you know, Sandhurst, when I went to Sandhurst in 1978, I was 22 years old. So I'd left school, I'd done, you know, I'd worked on farms, I'd been to college. So I'd grown up. But when I remember my very first day arriving at Sandhurst, and, you know, I drove there myself. I just arrived in my own car. But I had my 7.62 target rifle in the boot, because shooting was my great sort of passion and hobby. And I arrived outside Sandhurst, and here were all these 18-year-old kids being delivered by their mums and dads, wet behind the ears, straight out of school and straight into Sandhurst. I think I had a sort of slight advantage in that I was a mature student. Yeah, the course was 6 months. And I remember my final exercise we had in Cyprus. And I was told then, I didn't know until then, that I was in the running for Sword of Honour. You know, I was the top cadet in the platoon. I was a JUO, so I'd done pretty well, I suppose. But I had absolutely no idea that I was in the running for the Sword of Honour. And I was told just before the final bit of the exercise, and I had to give company orders. I was you know, you were given different jobs through the exercise. You know, if you weren't a section commander or number one on the Gympie, you were a platoon commander or eventually company commander. So I was made company commander, and I had to give company commanders orders. And apparently there was another cadet in another company who was giving his company commanders orders, and it was a competition between who gave the best orders.
Wow. Apparently
I must have done a better job than him. So that's how I ended up getting the Sword of Honour. But no, a great honour at the time. And you know, the passing out parade, it was the Duke of Edinburgh who presented it to me, who was Colonel of the regiment of the Queen's Own Highlanders. So it couldn't have been a better choice.
Oh, that's amazing, sir.
That is amazing. So you've had a lot of roles in military. You were in charge of the regimental shooting team in Hong Kong. You served in Northern Ireland as a close observation platoon commander. You've also been adjutant, and you were the SO3 Special Forces Marines. Have you got a favourite role, and why is that your favourite role?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed my whole time. But I remember when I first joined, literally 2 days after leaving Sandhurst, I drove into Kirk Newton in Edinburgh to join the Queensland Highlanders. And I was immediately grabbed to join the shooting team. Because there was the shooting officer at the time knew me pretty well, and he'd seen me at Bisley a few times. And so shooting was my great thing when I first joined the army. And I ran I was in the team for the first year, and then I ran the team and was in it for the next 3 or 4 years, culminating in us being the regiment who represented the British Army, and we went to Canada and shot. But I started at school doing the Ashburton, and then when I was in Aberdeen, I was in the OTC in Aberdeen, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I got up a shooting team there. They didn't have a shooting team, so I said, "Come on, let's get a shooting team up." And I took a shooting team to the TA Skilled at Arms meeting at Bisley, and then eventually did it with a regular army. So the shooting side I really enjoyed, but I think military-wise, my best job was close observation platoon commander, because that was an operational role in Northern Ireland. I already had a tour in Northern Ireland in 1979, which was in South Armagh, and then the tour was 1983 to 85. So we were there for 2 years. And you had a platoon of guys under your command, and you know, doing what I joined the army to do. So it was a sort of proper job. After that, I ended up as adjutant 251 Highland in Elgin. So was found out and got to know what the TA was all about. And we had our colours parade on Cooper Park in Elgin. And that was a great 2 years. I thoroughly enjoyed that. But I would say, you know, the best job was the close observation platoon. That's what I remember the most, I think.
And sir, you know, we're obviously lucky enough at One Highlanders now to have you as one of our battalion's 3 honorary colonels. Can you talk to us about how you came into that role?
Right. When I first left the army in 1989, the brigade commander at the time literally came knocking on my door here. He turned up at the front door, and I said, "Malcolm, we need a new commandant of the cadets. Would you be the commandant of the cadets? And then you can take over do that for a couple of years, and then you can take over the TA and be the company or the platoon commander of the TA up here, and sort of we'll get your sort of reserve forces career all sorted out." And I said, "Brigadier, with the greatest respect, I've done my bit for Queen and Country. I'm now starting a new career. Leave me for a few years and then come back. But at the moment, I'm going to be too busy trying to learn to be a farmer." Lo and behold, he got in touch with me 2 years later. And by this time, he'd retired. And he was the chief executive of the Royal Scottish Agricultural Benevolent Institution. And he asked me if I would join the RSABI and be their sort of man in Orkney. So he didn't get me for the army side, but he got me for the agricultural side. So he got me eventually. But that doesn't really answer your question. I think it was in 2004 that Margaret Walters, who was the commandant of the cadets at the time, she approached me because Colonel Gary Gibson was retiring, and asked me whether I would become the honorary colonel. A bit of a shock to be asked, but a great honour. And so I said, yes, that would be fantastic. And, you know, I've been doing it now for 15 years. I think I've been to every camp bar one. I did miss one camp a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great honour being the honorary colonel. But you know, I started off as honorary colonel of when it was the Independent Cadet Battery, Lovat Scouts, And obviously now, and we always came to One Highlanders camps. And now we are the Orkney and Shetland Battery One Highlanders.
Yeah.
Brackets Love at Scouts. So got the Love
Love
at
it
Scouts.
at heart, sir.
Still got the Love at Scouts, and I've got my hat here. I've got my bonnet on. So, but no, it's been a great honour to be Honorary Colonel, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's great just to, having been in the military, to now have that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And to just keep involved in the military side of life, which I've really enjoyed.
Absolutely. Sir, can you, you're touching on some of the other roles outside of the Army Cadet Force. Could you tell us some of the other organisations that you're involved in?
Well, I'm obviously involved in the Highland Reserve and Cadet Force Association. I'm vice chairman of the Northern Area. In fact, the first meeting I ever went to was when I was adjutant of the TA in Elgin. So that was way back in 1985. So I think having done it then for a couple of years when I was involved with the TA, and then to get back involved once I was in Civvy Street, was great. So I've been on that committee for quite a number of years, and I'm also, I have been on the board as well. But it gives you as you say, keeps you connected with what's going on in military circles. Other organisations I've been involved in, got heavily involved in tourism in Orkney. Mm-hmm. With the estate I've got up here has got this house called Scale House, which is right beside Skara Brae, which we opened to the public way back in 1997. And I joined the Orkney Area Tourist Board. And the Scottish Government, in their wisdom, disbanded area tourist boards. So we set up an organisation called the Orkney Tourism Group, which was very much to represent, the industry and the businesses in Orkney. And I took that forward and eventually became chairman of it for 2 or 3 years. And then decided that I'd done my bit and retired and handed over. But I got heavily involved in tourism. Obviously,
before you came on, sir, we were trying to figure out how you say the name of your house. How do you
Scale?
Say it?
Scale. Yeah, SKAILL. Scale House. Yeah.
We were trying to figure out how to say it.
Right. Well, scale in Norse was skal, which means a meeting hall.
Oh.
So there are a lot of scales around Orkney and in Shetland as well, and they tended to be Norse meeting halls. That's where the name comes from. But scale, my scale house was built by the Bishop of Orkney at the time in 1620. Wow. So this year we're celebrating our 400th anniversary of Scale House.
That's amazing.
We've been able to celebrate it because of the pandemic and as we've got at the moment, which is very sad. But we had all sorts of concerts and events and things planned for this year, but they've all had to be either cancelled or put on hold. But apart from tourism, obviously involved in farming, and I'm on the local NFU branch of that. And as I said earlier, I was involved in the RSABI, which is the sort of equivalent of the Army Benevolent Fund. It's just raising money for people who fall into hard times or get into sort of mental difficulty or something like that.
So you're a very busy man.
Yeah, so I got enough to keep me busy. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. So talking of events that have been cancelled, next Friday is obviously the 80th anniversary of when the 51st Highland Division were at St Valery, and we had cadets and adults that were going to go over to France to celebrate this occasion. Now you have a very personal connection with St Valery and the anniversary next weekend. Can you tell us a little bit about your connection?
Yes, certainly. I was going to go on that trip. So I'm very disappointed that we've had to cancel it.
We both were too, sir.
Yeah. Were you both going on it as well, were you?
Yeah,
you were both going on it, were you? Yeah, no, I was very disappointed because what's the date today? It's the 5th. We were going on the 9th to the 13th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we were going on that, and then I was going to go to the Seaforth Highlanders dinner in London on the Monday on the way back. So it was going to tie in really nicely. Mm-hmm. But no, my father was adjutant of 4th Seaforths when the 51st Highland Division went in the British Expeditionary Force to France. And he ended up at St. Valery and was captured, and he spent 5 years as a prisoner of war. So that's where, you know, I'm very interested in it and connected to it. And I don't know if you've probably seen on Facebook this last few days, I've been posting entries from his diary. Mm-hmm. We didn't know anything about his diary until after my dear father had died, and my brother discovered it. And it's all written in pencil. It's just a notebook written in pencil. He wrote 2 diaries. The one was his war diary, which went from the 27th of May to the 12th of June, 1940. And then he wrote another diary in about 1944, which only covers about a 6-week period when he was a prisoner of war. So we got 2 diaries, and my brother very kindly went and transcribed them. So I've now got a sort of electronic record of them, which is great. And I decided, you know, with the anniversary and everything, why don't I just post, you know, a day, you know, of his diary every day leading up to the 12th, and it will give people an idea of, you know, bring it to life of what happened. Mm-hmm. Certainly as far as Force Seaforths were concerned. Obviously there was a whole division there, but as far as Force Seaforth, then you can see, you know, where they went and how they were getting on. And they had a pretty sticky time. And I think he was very lucky to survive.
How does it feel knowing that your dad was there?
I think it's very proud, actually, in a way. But, you know, he went through the Second World War. He was a prisoner of war. After he came home, he ended up in the Korean War. He was second in command of the Black Watch in Korea and involved there and was in battles there. And then he was involved with the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. So he saw a lot of action, and you know, I'm very grateful that he survived. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. But I'm very proud of him indeed.
No, you should be, sir. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
So, sir, we're now going to ask you some questions that our cadets and adult volunteers have asked us. If you don't mind. So the first one is from Lance Corporal Alana Logue, and she's from Stornoway Detachment. And she said, what do you enjoy most about being the Honorary Colonel, and what challenges do you face being in such a small area away from the mainland?
The most enjoyable, I think, is the visits to annual camp. I really enjoy the visits to annual camp. That's why I think I've been to every single one, bar one. And I think the first camp I came to was Aldcar. And I'd been to, you know, to Otterburn and Walcop and Ripon and Barry Budden. And Barry Budden I enjoyed because I used to go to Barry Budden from the OTC when I was Aberdeen OTC. But in those days, it was wooden huts. When I first visited there as Honorary Colonel, I was quite surprised. I hadn't been there since it had been redeveloped. And what a difference. Whereas we had sort of these wooden barrack huts which had a coal stove in the middle of the floor, you know, with the chimney going up to keep you warm, and sort of huge big dormitory. But we had great fun there when I was in the OTC. But I think, you know, going back to being Honorary Colonel, definitely my visits to annual camp. Certainly up here when I visit the cadets on their sort of weekend training, if they're out on the ranges at Ramsdale, or they come and camp in my woods here at Binscarth. I always enjoy those visits. But I love the enthusiasm from the cadets. They're always full of enthusiasm. You know, whether they're all cammed up or whatever else they're doing, but they always seem to be full of enthusiasm. But no, it's great.
Do you feel like you face any challenges being Honorary Colonel away from the mainland?
I think it would be nice, now that we're all part of One Highlanders, it would be nice to come down and maybe take part in or come and see one of the weekend trainings that you lot do, and get more sort of integrated. But I know, you know, you've got your own Honorary Colonel down in the mainland. And I certainly wouldn't want to step on her toes.
Oh, not at all. Caroline would be delighted to have you down. And help coach our shooting teams.
Absolutely. No, I'd love that. That's why I love going to Ramsdale Range. And if I do get a chance to have a go on the weapons, then fantastic. I think
sure that can be arranged there.
I've managed a couple of times. I always have a competition with the other adults to see who can group tighter.
So you'll be shooting for the.
I haven't lost my eye too much. Say again?
You'll be shooting for the officers' mess, am I right?
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
We could use the help.
Right. If they've got an officers' mess team, yes, I'll come and join it. No problem.
You'll be a one-man team, sir.
But obviously the challenges for us up here are distance and travel, and to get to annual camp is a fair old trek, and even if people are going away on courses or meetings or anything like that, it's that extra distance. And I must say, the adults up here, well, I think all of you, because One Highlanders is spread out throughout the whole of the Highlands, and a lot of locations are well away from where centralised training is taking place, or if they're all being sent down to a course down at Frimley or something like that, it's a hell of a long way to go. So it's a huge commitment, and I think I'm amazed actually that all the volunteers, all the adult volunteers, put in a huge amount of work and effort, and it's fantastic. But I think, our challenge is that much further. And obviously Shetland, a little bit more. They've got another ferry ride compared to us. So it's a long way. But the more we can do locally, fine. But it's lovely to join up, and that's I think why I enjoy annual camp, and I think all the cadets enjoy annual camp. And the other one is we've got this connection with Bucks cadets, the Buckinghamshire cadets, and they come up here one year, and we go down to them one year. And part of their week when they're up here, they do a march along the west coast, and they camp near Scale. And I've gone to visit them at the camps there, and the ones from the south, the Buckinghamshire ones, are straight out of the middle of a city. Here they are on the west coast of Orkney, walking along cliffs and seeing fantastic scenery. I think it's quite an eye-opener for them, and they all seem to thoroughly enjoy it. And it's great meeting them. It's great meeting them.
So our next question is from Colour Sergeant Callum Ellis, who's the 51 Brigade Cadet Music Advisor. And his question is, what would be your message to a young person on one of the Isles who has seen the One Highlanders PR during lockdown and thinking that they may want to join when we return to face-to-face training?
Oh, I think, for any youngster to go and join any youth organisation, whether it's the cadets or the Air Force or the Boy Scouts or anything, I think is a great opportunity and a great way to develop your individual skills. But, to join the cadets, I think it's great seeing cadets who just started and seeing how their confidence builds over the years that they're in the cadets. And by the time they leave when they're 18, they're a very confident young adult. And I think, other kids who don't go and take that opportunity, I think are missing out. So if a cadet or if a youngster asked me whether what he should join, I would certainly say join the cadets, because you do learn life skills and you meet new people, make friends, and learn to work as a team, which is all great stuff for developing you and getting you ready for adult life and the workplace. And there are now qualifications you can get through it as well, and you can put it on your CV, which is, and I think employers look at that, and they like that sort of experience. And if you've done the Duke of Edinburgh's Award or something like that, that all adds to building your character and the rounded person you'll end up being.
So our next question comes from Sergeant Flora Thompson, and she is our detachment commander at Fortrose. She's asked, what's your most memorable moment while studying agriculture, and what was the best farm you worked on? Keep it PG, please, sir.
My most memorable moment, I think, is not one I'm going to say to you on this.
I can tell by your face as soon as you started laughing.
There was a lot of memorable moments. I thoroughly enjoyed agriculture. I did, I started, when I first left school, I went to work on a farm north of Aberdeen near Ellen. And here was me, straight out of public school, English accent, straight into a farm in the north of Aberdeenshire where they spoke Doric. I did not understand a word. It was like going to a foreign country. And that was my introduction to farming. And I worked on a couple of farms in Aberdeenshire for the first year before I went to college. And one was sort of just a mixed farm, arable, and had livestock and things like that. But the second farm we had seed potatoes, and I think I spent 5 months dressing tatties, picking out all the rotten ones, going across riddles, picking out all the rotten ones, and putting them into bags and sending them off.
Could you get more Scottish than that?
After 5 months of doing that, I didn't want to see a tatty again. I love eating them, but I certainly didn't want to handle them. I did, during my time at agricultural college, I did the second year we worked on a farm. I worked on a farm up Strathglass in sort of Highland Inverness, up near Cannock. And I had 5 months there. It was a mixed farm, very similar to what we farm here with beef cattle and sheep. And that was probably the most enjoyable farm I worked on. I really enjoyed that. And then I went to another farm again down in Aberdeenshire, which was I was only there for 6 weeks, and they had dairy and arable with seed potatoes and pigs. And I said to the farm when I arrived, I said, look, I don't want to do anything to do with seed potatoes, but can I work in your dairy for 3 weeks and your pig unit for 3 weeks? So that's what I did, and it gave me a good grounding in dairy farming and pig rearing, which I didn't know anything about, and thoroughly enjoyed both. But at the end of it, I said, really enjoyed the dairy, but there is absolutely no way that I'm going to become a dairy farmer. The commitment was just 24/7, 365 days a year. And I said, no, thanks. But, we're beef here, so we have a period where we're calving and lambing, and then things quieten down. Have some of the year where you can relax. But dairy was, yeah. But no, and while I was at Aberdeen, as I said before, I was in the OTC there. So that was great fun. Thoroughly enjoyed that. I was actually a drummer. I was in the pipes and drums. So I was a side drummer because I was pipes and drums when I was at school at Glenarmond. And then I did 3 years with the OTC doing in the pipes and drums, so which was great fun, and ran the shooting team.
Man.
While I was trying to learn everything about agriculture. That's what I was interested in when I first came to annual camp with One Highlanders, that you always had cadets from the Aberdeen UOTC that came to help you out.
They always come when we're at Barrybudden, they often
come. Yeah, no, which is great. So I recognised their stable belt, and I said, "Oh, all right, I remember you."
So our last question then, it's actually a few questions from Col Sergeant Callum Ellis, and he has been asking. This is the first question. He said, "Have you seen Scotland's Army Cadets' recent social distance music video playing the 7th Furlong to Gibraltar?"
I haven't actually. No. I'm not very good on social media and things like that. Trying to post this diary on social media has been quite a challenge for me. But
we can send it to you, sir. It's really good. You'll enjoy it. One Highlanders were the second biggest contributor in terms of wins, and we had lots from Orkney and Shetland too. So it'll be something you'd like to see. We'll definitely send that to you.
Yeah, no, I would thoroughly enjoy seeing that. I get an invitation to go to the beating retreat on Edinburgh Castle, which is in April every year.
Yeah.
And I would love to go to it, but it's right in the middle of lambing.
Oh, I'm sure we could take your ticket for you.
I just can't get away from here, so I'll get to it once I retire, if I'm still Honorary Colonel, but I don't know which will come first. But I would love to go to that, and I love pipe music. Having been in the pipes and drums for 7 years, I love pipe music, And certainly the Poppy Scotland initiative on the 12th of June, where everyone playing Heroes of St Valerie on their doorstep, I think will be quite moving. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can imagine, sir.
Yeah.
So we've got one more question for you.
Yeah.
On you go, Callum. Sorry.
So you want to ask, because my Wi-Fi is not the best.
Yeah, I can ask, that's fine. So again, this comes from the 51 Brigade Music Advisor, SSI Callum Ellis, and he's asked, why is cultural music, be it pipes and drums, traditional Scottish music or military band, so important for the ACF to maintain?
That's a very good question. Goodness me. I think it's all part of our tradition. And I think, the British Army as a whole, with what they do with trooping the colour and all that, it's all part of the British sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it's part of our society, and it's what people expect of us. And I think I am a great traditionalist, and so I don't like seeing change. And I think, I remember the Queensland Highlanders had a pipes and drums, and we also had a military band. And it was a great shame after all the amalgamations when the military bands all disappeared. Mm-hmm. Now one military band, for the whole of Scotland. And I think it's vitally important. And I think just teaching kids, youngsters, to play a musical instrument is a great talent to have, and to bring that talent out. And the fact that you've managed to go to Balmoral on a number of occasions with the pipes and drums is fantastic. I did that once with the Aberdeen University OTC pipes and drums. We played at Balmoral it was Sunday just before it was between the church service and lunch, and we played in front of the royal family, including the Queen, and which was a great honour. And for a youngster to experience that, as your youngsters have done over the last few years at Balmoral, and I always remember that day. And I remember standing there with my side drum and my big Busby hat that we had, and Her Majesty came up to me, and I remember looking down at her and thinking, goodness me, I didn't realise she was so small.
I hope you didn't say that to her, sir.
No, I didn't say that to her, but that's what I was thinking. But those are one of those memories that just stick in your mind. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the youngsters who've been to Balmoral, that they'll have come away with amazing memories, which they will always look back on with great fondness. And I think, playing at a beating retreat, playing in front of a crowd, does give you a certain sense of pride. And I think that's why it's very important. I think that they continue. So long live the cadets, pipes and drums and military bands.
No, that's great, sir. Thank you for answering all those questions. I hope that wasn't too traumatizing for you. Not
at all. No, thoroughly enjoyed it.
In honour of the anniversary of St Valerie next Friday, we would love it if you would read one of your father's diary entries to us. Would that be okay?
Yeah. You warned me about this, and I did go through the diary, and I think what I've picked out is really is part of what I posted yesterday, because yesterday, which was the 4th of June, was really the day where 4 Seaforths had a fairly difficult time against the enemy. My father being there as adjutant, he mentions the adjutant did this, the adjutant did that. And I thought, well, I'll just read out these bits because it's where I think, well, he was only 25.
Wow.
That was how old he was at the time. So wow. I don't know what ages you are, but if you
I'm 23.
Well, there you go. And you're, what are you, Stuart?
Sergeant Taggart's too old to tell you his age. To pretend he's 23, but he's not.
Yeah, but if you think, you know, my dad was 25, but there were jocks in the battalion there who were a lot younger than that. They were your age. So if you're reading that diary and you think, well, you know, I could be in this situation at my age, it's quite daunting, really. And what they went through is quite amazing. So I'll just read what I've got here. The CO again went forward to Delta Company area, and soon after he left, the enemy shelled the orchard in which battalion headquarters was situated and the ground between this orchard and D Company positions. No casualties from this shell fire. So battalion headquarters is obviously where my father was. So he was being shelled at this time. The adjutant attempted to go around the forward edges of the Bois de Villers to find out what was happening to C and A companies. The front of the wood was, however, being subjected to heavy machine gun fire, and the enemy seemed to have very good observation of this area. A carrier was therefore sent round the rear of the wood to follow up the north side to find A Company. A message came back from A Company that C Company had been badly shot up and that A Company was held up just clear of the northeast of the Bois de Villers. Bois de Villers was the wood where the Germans were based, where they were holed up, and that's what they were trying to dislodge them from, or being attacked from. The CO returned from D Company, battalion headquarters, and very soon after returned, the enemy put in a very heavy concentration on the orchard. The casualties at battalion headquarters were serious. Wounded, Lieutenant Colonel Holdsworth, the CO, Second Lieutenant Lindsay, the signals officer, Captain McBeef, the carrier platoon officer, and Lance Sergeant Wells, the signal sergeant, plus 2 signallers who were killed. So the fact that there was a lot of casualties then, I just think, you know, my father was very lucky indeed that he wasn't at least wounded or else killed. The CO was wounded in 3 places, but was a walking case, and told the adjutant before going back to keep the battalion where it was at the present. He would report the situation to brigade, and information would be sent forward from there concerning further advance in the attack. He would also send up Major Shaw Mackenzie to take over command of the battalion. The other wounded were sent back to the RAP. The CO went to Zalio and then to brigade headquarters. The adjutant went forward with the intelligence sergeant to D Company area to inform the company commander of the CO's decision. Captain Baird, OC Headquarter Company, remained in charge of battalion headquarters. On the way to D Company, German dive bombers commenced systematic dive bombing of our line from the 4th Cameron area and the orchards in D Company, including the front edges of the Bois de Villers to A Company area. This bombing, although extremely nerve-wracking, did not produce very many casualties. So, you know, it really brings home, I think, you know, what they were under at the time.
Yeah.
Now, Major Shaw Mackenzie, he took over as CO after Colonel Holdsworth was injured. And I had the opportunity I was staying at his house on the Blackar near Cromarty. And this was with his daughter and granddaughter were there at the time. He was no longer with us, but his granddaughter said, look, we've got war diaries here of our grandfather. Would you like to read them? And I said, oh, that would be lovely. So I remember reading this diary, and it kept saying RAAS and I, RAAS and I. You know, my father was known as RAAS because his initials were RAAS, and that was his nickname. And I can remember to this day this one entry in it, and he said, RAAS and I were going along this ditch with machine gun fire going over the top of us, and we hid in a hen house. So, you know, this might have been this same day or a day or 2 later. I don't know. I can't remember what the dates were on it. But I would love to see those diaries again and get a copy of them if possible. But I don't know if I'll manage to do that. But it just brings home, I think, what they went under. And, you know, I will continue posting each day the entries in his diary up until the 12th of June, which is when it sadly stops. You know, it'll, you can just see what certainly 4 Seaforths and the 51st Highland Division went through. And, you know, obviously it was the time of Dunkirk, and everyone was getting off the beaches at Dunkirk, and they thought they would get off the beaches at St. Valery, and sadly it just wasn't going to happen. And so, yeah, but he survived.
Thank you very much, because I think you've really brought that to life. It's different reading it on a page than it is hearing someone actually say it out loud.
Absolutely.
It's very moving.
You know, he if you want, he wrote another diary, which was when he was a prisoner of war. And this diary literally covers a period March to July 1944. And I don't know if you'd like, I could read out a bit out of this diary as well.
Yes, sir, that would be amazing.
This is, it gives you a bit of an idea of sort of life in the camp. His diary really is more his thoughts and things that he was thinking about, and he did a lot of reading when he was in prisoner of war, because not a lot else to do. But one thing I was quite amazed by, and I'll just read this one out, is Friday the 3rd of March 1944. There was some skating for a couple of hours again this morning. So they had an ice rink. I wasn't expecting that. The ice was rather soft and slushy, but I managed to get the loan of Pat Prosser's skates, which were lovely and made all the difference in mastering some figures. Jimmy has been teaching me for ages. Otherwise, an uneventful morning. Did a little work in the canteen, silence room during the afternoon, but didn't get very far with it, as I was in that mood where one finds oneself staring at the same page and taking nothing in. One's mind is quite unreceptive to the book in front of you and has followed various lines of thought of its own. Had a short walk with the SLM. Now, SLM was his abbreviation for a fellow prisoner of war, and I remember him talking about the SLM, and SLM stood for Silly Little Man. But I don't know the name of the SLM. I don't know his proper name, so I can't say anything. Had a short walk with the SLM after parade, and after supper, 8 of us went to see the musical festival programme, Round the World in Song and Dance, which was excellent and most enjoyable. There were some national songs from the British Isles sung by the choir. Then the Welsh choir, led by Kaz Jones Mortimer, got busy in Welsh. The expressions on Kaz's face during the performance were the funniest thing we've seen for a long time. After this, the choir sang an excellent English folk song called Greensleeves, which I thought delightful. The Spanish orderly then did a couple of Spanish dances and also sang. I must say, I thought there was a lot of bull attached to that dance. There was some Highland dancing with Hector Ross playing the pipes. Peter Oliver danced the Shean Trus very well. I probably pronounced that wrong, as my Gaelic's not very good. But he seems to be putting on fat rapidly in prison life. The Ukrainian orderly did a Russian dance, A Cossack's Dream. Very well, he said. He looked the part and did a good deal of sword brandishing. The front row seemed a bit nervous lest he should lose his grip on it during some of the particular savage whirls that he made. Next, the Maoris gave a delightful performance in full dress and war paint. The French Canadians sang some voyageur songs around the campfire, and the whole show came to a finish with the choir and audience singing some sea shanties. Excellent entertainment. So they were certainly managed to keep themselves entertained.
Yeah, it's so strange hearing that, because it's not something you think would ever have happened. Like when I think of a prisoner of war camp, that's not the image that I've got in my head of what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah. But it just shows how multinational the prisoner of war camp was. You know, there were people there from all over the place. It wasn't just the officers of 51 Highland Division.
Yeah.
There was a couple of other bits. that I was going to read, if you're not bored already. If I've
Oh
got
no, it's really interesting hearing this, sir.
Was stooged today with Roddy, so had little time for any intellectual study. We had a very humorous day together, and all the chores went very smoothly. In fact, I hardly realized we were workers, as everything seemed to get done without any effort. I had a drink in the morning with Fanny, who thought I would need a little sustenance during my morning's labours. I have no idea what the drink was, whether they had an illicit still or something like that. I don't know. Got my November clothes parcel today. Quite a good one with a great deal of chocolate. One thing infuriated me, as the Red Cross had taken out a tin of toothpaste because they said the parcel was overweight, but they left in 3 tins of boot polish and also stuck in one of their own cakes of soap. Why they can't think a little and realise that tooth powder is most important, I don't know. That type of thoughtless adherence to the letter automatic machine action is the common characteristic of a bureaucracy which we must avoid at all costs. Element is completely lacking and no intelligence is employed. So he was given lots of boot polish, but he wasn't given his toothpaste.
That's so funny hearing that.
Yeah, and the final bit I wanted to read really is June 1944. The summer has certainly not put in an appearance yet this month, 22nd. It has been cold, cloudy and wet almost the whole time, which is very depressing. However, the news this month has been more than compensation for the weather. The Gs, which I presume is the Guards, told us that the invasion began on the 6th with landings on the Cherbourg Peninsula, and next day their papers were full of it. It seems to be going full swing and according to plan. Their papers just now are full of their secret weapon, which they are using against London and the southeast of England. It appears to be a pilotless aircraft filled with high explosives, which is just buzzed off into the blue with the hope that it will create as much havoc and destruction as possible. Since it is not as an accurate device and must be aimed at a large area or town, such as London, in order to obtain an effective hit. 8 chaps escaped from a tunnel from Block 2 the other day. 2 were caught on the hill behind the camp, and we had a parade at 3 a.m. Most of them had been recaptured since. The cricket season is well underway just now, although the weather is doing all it can to make playing unpleasant or impossible. In fact, one might say typical English cricket weather, with the usual groups of people going out every now and then to inspect the pitch. So there we go. But they got to hear, obviously, about D-Day, which is something. And
Thanks for sharing that with
all
us.
about the,
It's really great to hear some of those diary entries. They're really interesting.
So yeah, but no, it is fascinating reading. But as I said, you know, I didn't know anything about this until after my dear pa had passed away. But one thing we did do, because he never talked about the war, you know, I can remember him having dreams. You know, you would hear him in the night sort of shouting. And I would come down in the morning and say, oh, I dreamt I was back in the bag. They used to call it the bag, dreaming all about the krauts. So I think that was quite nerve-wracking for him, that, you know, to be taken back and having dreams like that. But so he never really spoke about it, but my brother managed to sit him down one day, about a year before he died, and videoed him. And we have a video of my pa, literally he just sat him down with a large whiskey and said, right, Dad, tell us about the war. And he did. He told us about, you know, St. Valery and then the long march to Germany. They marched to the Rhine and then they went on barges down the river. And then they were onto a train and in cattle trucks right down into southern Bavaria, where he was eventually incarcerated. But he was in 5 different prisoner of war camps during the war. And when he was released, it was the Americans, General Patton and his troops, who liberated them. And he said that, you know, all the Germans vanished. They disappeared, you know, as soon as the Americans arrived. Apart from one. One decided he would stay behind and hand over to the Americans and be the sort of honest broker, as it were. And my father was absolutely horrified because Patton had him shot. Which he said really was just the one thing that we were fighting against, was that sort of barbarism. So he wasn't very, Dad wasn't very impressed by that. But he managed to get he was liberated sort of in May, beginning of May in 1945. And when was VE Day? Was it the 8th of May? And he managed to get a lift back to UK on a Lancaster bomber. And he thinks he flew into somewhere like Northolt. It was somewhere near London anyway. And he got into the middle of London with a chum and hit Piccadilly Circus literally on VE Day. So, you know, from being a prisoner of war to then being amongst all the crowds in London was quite something.
Wow.
So he had a good homecoming, put it that way. So,
no, sir, thank you so much for joining us today for an interview and sharing all of those stories about your father. It's been really nice to hear, and I know people will really enjoy watching this, especially coming up to the anniversary next Friday. It's just a shame that we're not going over to France, but
it is, yeah. Hopefully we'll get there next year.
We'll get there next year, yeah. And thank you again for coming on and allowing us to interview you today. It's been really nice to get to know you a bit more.
Not at all.
We'll see you soon.
And I look forward to seeing you at annual camp, if not before.
We will see you there, sir.